Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the European Union and the expansion of the European Union, maybe the other agreements, the European Union in relation to the rest of the world, etc. Okay, so starting with this discussion of advantage and disadvantage of enlargement of the European Union. In class we'll talk more about that, maybe we can have a bit of a discussion. But yes, the European Union has expanded quite fast, but also it's building relations, opening up in economic ways or political ways to other countries that aren't even members, like Switzerland or India. There's free trade agreements, maybe agreements of freedom of movement with the Swiss, or maybe the Swiss are in the customs union but not the single market, etc. We've got this with the economic integration. You've got this single market where there's freedom of movement of goods and services and people, harmonisation of laws, so we all have the same standards, etc., and no tariffs, etc. But a customs union is just no borders, no tariffs on goods, and so it doesn't mean there's freedom of movement of goods and services. It doesn't mean that we recognise the different standards. The single market actually is where we start recognising qualifications and things like that. So, there are various ways to integrate with the European Union without being a full member, and the European Union's enlarged in that sense too. Now, obviously the great advantage of the European Union enlarging is it is spreading its values. There is a process at the moment. Globalization is really an integration of the world into one system. Barriers are coming down. We are becoming interdependent as different nations. And which values will prevail? Will it be the Chinese value of controlling everything, or maybe the American value of being total free market, very independent and individualist and not having such solidarity, or the Russian value of being, the big, strong man and very communal in some senses, the Russians. So there is this battle, and obviously every nation, maybe culture, or even groups of nations, want their values to prevail because they believe in those principles. The European Union do believe their values are universal. Human rights, peace, diversity, valuing diversity, solidarity, the free market. These we believe as Europeans are universal and should prevail in the global system as we integrate into a more globalized world, into a global village, if you like. And so enlargement has this advantage that you are winning this battle of values, and you're becoming relatively stronger in confrontation with competitors like America and China and Russia. There is a bit of a problem because this is causing tensions to rise. For example, with Russia, we've seen with Ukraine, there's been a conflict between Russia influence and, Ukraine wanted Crimea, and Russia invaded Crimea, so they so that Ukrainians accuse them. And there is this tension. The Russians do resort to force when it comes to their interests, and the European Union influence is spreading around those parts rather near. The Russians like to think of spheres of influence, having spheres of influence. The big powers should have spheres of influence. The European Union don't believe in this way of thinking. They believe, there should be freedom to choose if a nation wishes to become European and it shares the same values. Remember, that is very important. You can't become a European member state if you don't share the same values. So if they have the same values and they want to, they should be able to, and the European Union will welcome them because they value diversity. There was a question of Turkey joining the European Union at some point. Much of the European Union resist. The people were very worried about this because this goes from Christianity to a Muslim culture. But it would have been, according to the philosophy of the European Union, that it would have created a lot of diversity. But there were problems, as I've said in the past. Turkey has problems with freedom of speech and democracy. You cannot criticise the army, for example, which would be against freedom of speech, and the Army Council do have a governing role in the country, which we would see the European Union sees as being undemocratic. And so there were a few hitches, a few obstacles for Turkey to join, and now I doubt Turkey is that interested, as it's gone a bit the other way, less democratic even. But we've changed from the European Economic Community to the European Union, and we could become in the future the European and Mediterranean Union or something. There's nothing to stop us. The idea of the European Union is to spread its values globally and create, a one system, a community, instead of lots of communities, lots of separate communities, one big diverse community. The motto of Europe is unity in diversity. So we believe in unity and in diversity, and that is the European recipe for world peace, and that's the mission of the European Union. So maybe in the future we will enlarge further afield, even outside Europe, maybe even territorially very separate. Maybe, I don't know, even a country very far from the European Union could join the European Union if it shares the same values. The diversity is always a great value added to the European Union, a great added synergy, shall we say. So there were other agreements, or treaties, we've been calling them treaties. There are other treaties that the European did, other than those I've talked about, the ones that made a very big difference. But we've got the Luxembourg Agreement, which we can call the Single European Act, because it created the single market. Suddenly the single market was a legally recognised entity. Maastricht Agreement we've talked about a little bit. The Amsterdam Agreement was an agreement, a treaty to enlarge the European Union. These treaties are discussed at the summits by the European Council. The European Council, now we have a European Council recognised in law. That's another result of the Lisbon Treaty. There is really an organ called the European Council. They're all the heads of government, and they must agree, must be unanimous to have a treaty. It must go through their national parliaments and be ratified by the national parliaments. And these treaties would be all, agreed unanimously. It could be at these summits maybe added competencies. Maybe they could add a competence of defending Europe and the European army, or fiscal competence. That's another one where the European Union has the ability to raise taxes in Europe and then spend those taxes in different ways on different projects. That would be a fiscal union, which would be an extension of the monetary union. We've got now the euro, the single currency. Obviously that's only 15 countries in that, but they could have a fiscal union. That would be the natural extension of that integration, joining together to raise taxes from the citizens and spend those taxes. And obviously, maybe even if we look really far into the future, the government, the European Bank can, or the Commission probably, would raise the taxes, would have a budget and ask citizens in the 15 euro zone countries for taxes and give budgets to the national parliaments, to spend on their choices, as well as having their own projects, maybe a European army or whatever. So this would be an incredibly deep integration and would need unanimity at a summit by the European Council, this famous European Council. It being applied just to 15 countries with a fiscal union, obviously it would be just unanimity of the 15 countries. The other countries have no say on that because they're not part of it. But a European army that would defend the 27 member states would need 27 member states' consensus. Unanimity would be required there too. Now, you've also got the Nice Agreement, where we see further enlargement and also integration on education, setting of European competencies, for example, for schools. Every school has the objective of reaching the European key competencies, which would, were becoming competent in your mother tongue language, in English, which is an international language, technology, mathematics, and all these other competencies. So, and different projects, educational projects where you can have exchanges, etc. Our school was, or the course we're doing, the European Classic, Liceo Classico Europeo, is a product of the Maastricht Agreement, because in the Maastricht Agreement, one article said that every member state must use other member states' teachers to teach their subjects in their mother tongue language. So we have in our school, geography taught in French and English. We teach law and economics in English, etc. So, all these treaties are all about integrating us according to our European values. And that is how we have integrated through these treaties. In the Maastricht Treaty, it also created the European citizenship, which means all the citizens of European Union have European citizenship, and with that they have rights and duties. Right to vote in the local election, for example. I live in Turin and I can vote in my local election even if I'm English, or even put myself up to be elected. I've got the right of freedom of movement anywhere, of using health services, of having my qualifications recognised, my driving licence recognised, everything. So we've got this European citizenship, very important. Remember, it doesn't substitute our national citizenship, it's added to it. So it gives us added rights. It doesn't take any of our existing national rights and duties which we get from being a national citizen. It doesn't take those away. That's very important to say.